Well, as you've been hearing, the discussion in the wake of the federal election is more and more now touching on Western anger, alienation, and even talk of Western separation. The Trudeau Liberal government finds itself in that difficult position after the election of having lost all of its MPs from Alberta and Saskatchewan. Today, at his press conference, Prime Minister Trudeau said he will continue to try to reach out to Canadians in the West.
I have been very, very clear in telling Canadians from coast to coast to coast that we need to recognize that Albertans and people in Saskatchewan have faced very difficult years over these past few years because of global commodity prices, because of challenges that they're facing that, for a long time they weren't able to get their resources to markets other than the United States. We are moving forward to solve some of those challenges, but it's going to take all Canadians sticking together, helping out folks who are struggling in places like Alberta and Saskatchewan.
Now, Prime Minister Trudeau also mentioned at that same press conference that having spoken over the past 24 hours with the Alberta Premier Jason Kenney and Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe. And he said he would be talking to the Mayor of Edmonton, Don Iveson. Well, we've placed a call to Don Iveson, the Mayor of Edmonton. He's on the line right now. Mayor Iveson, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.
Okay, we are preempting the Prime Minister in a way, but when he talks to you, and if he asks your advice on what he can do in the short term to try and address this issue of alienation, of anger, and of his lack of representation in the West, what's your advice to him?
Well, I think, having worked closely with Minister Amarjeet Sohi, who had the file of completing the pipeline and unfortunately was defeated and had been one of our important cabinet voices in Ottawa, having looked him in the eye and said, do you really intend to build this pipeline? Minister Sohi said, yes, absolutely. And I asked the same question to the Prime Minister, and he said, yes, absolutely. And so 2/3 of the country, more or less, voted for expansion of that pipeline, and a different 2/3 of the country voted for strong action on climate change. And I think the signal from Canadians that we can pull out of this is that we need to do both. We need better energy infrastructure for products that are being developed today for consumers who demand them while we make an energy transition to a lower carbon future. And, city halls have been pragmatically tackling that question for many years, and the country is going to have to rise to that challenge and meet those different issues that are not at odds, but have become political footballs. So if we can get the pipeline question settled, that will go an awful long way, while at the same time doing what we must to meet the global climate crisis.
How do you deal with, you talk about political footballs, how do you deal with it when you talk about first of all, Amarjeet Sohi is no longer there as your interlocutor, so that's one difficulty, but also when you talk about the level of rhetoric, you're in a part of the world where people are accusing the Prime Minister diversely of being a hypocrite or buying the pipeline to nix the project. What do you say to people? Today he said that the Trans Mountain pipeline will go ahead, whatever you think about it, but he said that it is going to go ahead. So what do you say to fellow Albertans about the level of mistrust and anger and different versions of reality that people have?
Well, I think there's a lot of different versions of reality. If you talk to 10 Edmontonians, you'll find 3 or 4 who really hate me and the things that I'm doing as a leader, and yet I still have a mandate to serve here. So it's a democracy, and we disagree using our words, thank goodness. And so there's anger and there's venting happening. I don't think or believe that it's going to amount to much. I think now is the time really for leaders to be pulling the country together with solutions rather than bellicose rhetoric. And I think a number of the premiers have said, let's roll up our sleeves and work together to solve these problems. And I think Parliament now has to take more of a City Hall-like coalition building approach, given its minority structure, which is the kind of work I have to do as a mayor every day. So I think we can share a lot about the culture of getting things done transparently and openly, collaboratively. That's why Canadians trust local governments the most in every survey we've ever seen. And so, we're happy to lend advice and support. And of course, we meet with the Prime Minister regularly as mayors. And so there are other touch points besides cabinet members to keep in contact with what's happening on the ground. And I look forward to hearing from the Prime Minister this week.
When you hear Albertan and Saskatchewan politicians talking about the rise of Western separatism, what do you say?
Well, I think they've encouraged some of it, quite frankly, so I think now that they're discouraging it and realizing that we do need a country with ports to get our resources to. I mean, we also need those ports to be open to our resources. So we need to be able to have mature conversations as a country about resource policy and about infrastructure to connect our products to markets in the most environmentally responsible, cost-effective, and safe way possible. Unfortunately, things have flared up around this pipeline conversation, but we need to have a much deeper conversation about how we move goods around this country. And unite behind our economy and its opportunities, both its relevance today as a conventional energy producer, but we're great energy problem solvers here in Alberta. We're great water problem solvers here in Alberta, and those are relevant skills to a world going through a huge transition about climate change.
I guess the question begs, and that is also you talk about the importance, the central importance of getting the pipeline up and running, the Trans Mountain Pipeline. The Prime Minister is committed to continuing to try to do that. Are you confident that it will go ahead? Because there's still questions about the construction, about the timelines, about further challenges to it. Are you confident that it will go ahead?
I served at Edmonton City Hall with Amarjeet Sohi for 9 years. He's one of the most honorable people in public service. And so, I mourn his loss for a variety of reasons. But I trust that the work that he has done in the last year or so in his time on that portfolio will get the job done, and that he was sincerely on that mission on behalf of Canadians and Albertans.
Is there anything else you would tell the Prime Minister in terms of reaching out to Westerners beyond the pipeline and the obvious the energy politics, in terms of this absence that he now has a representation in Western Canada? I know you mentioned the importance of other interlocutors like yourself and mayors.
Well, I think, I have to give this Prime Minister credit for traveling to Alberta, even as people talked about Western alienation, even as people speculated that he would lose seats here. And the smart political strategy, I suppose, the mercenary strategy would have been to write off Alberta. But he kept coming here, and he kept meeting with us, and he kept meeting with business and community leaders here. And I would encourage him to continue to do so, and to be seen here and to be engaged with a variety of governmental voices, provincial, municipal, and Indigenous, in order to calm waters and stay engaged. He is the Prime Minister of the whole country, after all. He does have that mandate constitutionally and democratically. I respect that, and he'll always be welcome here.
Okay, Don Iveson, thank you very much for taking the time.
Pleasure.